Washington County to learn how the county would benefit from an urban forestry program. And my cursor isn't working. Let's try this again. There we go. My name is Kelly Lau. I'm a member of the Board of Tree Keepers, along with these other people listed down at the bottom of the slide. In addition, I'm the Executive Director for State Forest Trust of Oregon. Tree Keepers was formed to protect existing trees for their many benefits by advocating for sustainable development. And you can see here a number of the activities we're engaged in: monitoring urban housing developments, research best practices, and community engagement. As most of you know, unincorporated areas of Washington County are some of the last places in the Portland metro area that don't have protection for trees, which are so critical for our county's ability to mitigate and adapt to climate change. And I think we've all probably seen the studies that have come out and continue to come out about the multiple various benefits of trees, physical, social, ecological, and economic returns that they bring to communities. But with the increasing impact of climate change, existing trees are really key to managing the situation. Mature, large form trees reduce heat, air pollution, and excessive storm water. But clearly we need housing as well, and in the metro area. But this can be balanced with environmental sustainability through planning, creative design that incorporates existing trees as well as other significant natural areas. An urban forest plan would engage our diverse communities in maintaining, enhancing our much needed trees. To help us understand what an urban forest plan could do or would be for Washington County, we have Scott Altenhoff. He is the manager for the Oregon Department of Forestry, Urban and Community Forestry Program, Assistance Program. Prior to taking on this role in June of 2022, he spent 17 years as an urban forester with the city of Eugene. He serves on the board of directors for the Society of Municipal Arborists as a past president and liaison to the International Society of Arboriculture. He is co-chair on the board of Canopy Watch International and a steering committee member for the Urban Wood Network at the state, regional, and national levels. Scott has a long-standing interest in promoting urban sustainability via trees and green infrastructure, and believes that working smarter, not harder, will be critical to our fight against the many threats facing our urban and community trees. Scott's going to speak for about 35 minutes, and then when he's done, we'll open up the chat so you can post any questions you might have for him. And my fellow board member, Josie, will be facilitating the Q&A. So with that, welcome, Scott. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you everyone for participating in this discussion tonight. Hope to keep my presentation on point and fairly brief and spend a lot of time answering questions and fielding concerns and so forth. As mentioned, I am relatively new to this position, but I am delighted to be interacting with the Tree Keepers of Washington County and Washington County staff and folks who are living and working in the epicenter of our recently discovered emerald ash borer outbreak. There are many distinguishing characteristics of Washington County, and not that you needed another, but it's going to be significant. This is no small event, but like many of the stressors that we'll discuss tonight, it's just one of many. So everything that we can do to prepare and follow best management practices for planning and management will serve us well and not be time, energy, or money wasted. So with that, I'm going to share my screen here. And there we go. And now I'm going to do that. And of course, I lost my cursor. I don't suppose that you can see my screen, can you?
Cannot, yes.
You can?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay, sorry. This stymied me last time too. Sorry. Don't do this. I've been having some issues with my PC. Okay, there we go. And screen 1, screen 2 from the beginning. How about now? Is that in presenter mode?
Not yet.
Nope, still see you.
Kelly, are you sure did you stop
Yeah.
sharing your screen?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Try it again, Scott.
Okay, it's
One alternative might be to send your slides over to Josie or Kelly, who could then put them up from their screens.
let's see. So, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't hit the all important share and from the
There you
beginning
go.
now.
Much better.
Okay, and now it's in presenter mode.
No, we're seeing your.
Yes.
There it is. We got there. Very good.
Finally, okay.
It's
Now
good.
that I've used up all my technical difficulties, we can get into the substance. Thank you for your patience. So as mentioned, my talk tonight will be about maximizing trees, tree canopy cover and tree health and urban forest health, as well as livability in Washington County, and how establishing an urban forestry program and hiring professional staff and following best management practices can help protect both of those. We're often posed with a fool's choice, an artificial dilemma or a zero-sum game, which pits development against natural resources. And I think that's a false choice. As mentioned in our introduction, as Kelly mentioned, we can have both, and it's not impossible. So my objectives tonight are threefold. I'd like to provide a quick summary and overview of what I see to be the pressing urban forestry issues and challenges that face not just Oregon, but Washington County in particular. Next, I'd like to describe how an urban forestry program might be able to help with these challenges and what an ideal program might look like. And I'll just say from the onset, there is no such thing as the ideal program. It's going to be determined by community sentiment and community goal setting. So far be it from, it would be impossible for someone externally to say this is an ideal program. That is community determined. And lastly, I'd like to provide a couple suggestions on how we might move from the current situation related to urban forestry and move towards Washington County's ideal. Before I get in much further, I'd just like to acknowledge the Atalafi Kalapuya that were the original inhabitants of Washington County and recognize what an amazing job they did living in harmony with the landscape and setting a sustainable model. They were able to work with fire skillfully to keep plants and animals and ecosystems intact and in great health. And likewise, they understood and recognized that the rivers and the annual flooding that occurred was part of the natural cycle. In contrast, today we tend to suppress fires and we suppress flooding, and we do so in large part at our own peril or to the detriment of the broader whole, the ecosystems that surround us. And my hope is that we can understand that traditional ecological knowledge and follow that model and use a more systems-based approach to to build our communities and achieve the prosperity that we all want. I had to include the slide, as Joni Mitchell so aptly said. I can't remember if it was late 60s or early 70s. Doesn't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got until it's gone? We are at a crossroads with regard to the forests and urban forests surrounding within Washington County. It's not too late, but it soon will be. Everything that we can do now to plan and prepare and assess and take decisive action will help to prevent a lot of the situations and challenges that we see increasing in frequency year after year. The first of those that I know you're all familiar with relates to climate change induced extreme heat and ecological drought. We're all familiar with the heat dome that landed over the US a couple years ago and was responsible for several hundred deaths here in the Pacific Northwest. It was catastrophic, not just for people, but for trees and for forests, and it's likely to continue. As a result of that extreme heat and ecological drought, we also experienced, as I would know everyone's familiar with, catastrophic wildfires. And it wasn't just the threat of the conflagrations, it was the very real impact on our air quality. I know personally, an Oregon without clean air is not an Oregon that I necessarily want to retire in. I really require open spaces and clean air and clean water. And for the first time in my 30 years of being in Oregon, I asked myself, is this going to be my forever place? So I am highly vested in helping to do what we can to mitigate the threat of wildfire, not just to protect lives from and property from destruction for obvious reasons, but for the air quality and livability factors. Alongside or intertwined with those is the urban heat island effect. As we know, in highly developed areas, the average temperature is often up to 8 or 9 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than surrounding forested areas. So this really highlights the need to protect our existing forests and ecosystems, riparian areas, and cultivate new areas within our cities that can help keep those urban temperatures down. We're also all very familiar with other types of extreme weather, whether that is high winds or the heavy snows or ice damage that we suffered throughout the Willamette Valley and elsewhere over the last decade. I can't tell you how many millions upon millions of dollars as a state in lost revenue, in losses to the canopy, to activities and so forth. The cost of these extreme weather events is in the millions, if not billions of dollars. So please keep that in mind when we're talking about the possibility of hiring an urban forester or urban forestry staff and the cost that that entails. We need to be mindful and remember that we're spending a tremendous amount of money by not doing anything. And if we can reduce the number of tree incidents and build resilience within our urban forest and throughout our community systems, that will be money well spent, and the net benefits will be far greater. Last but not least, as mentioned earlier, we recently discovered the emerald ash borer, known to be the most destructive forest pest in US history. Compared to the emerald ash borer, the Dutch elm disease and chestnut blight almost look mild in comparison. Here in Oregon, we're fortunate that our streetscapes, as demonstrated down here, I'll see if I can get my laser pointer. This picture here shows an area in Ohio that all these are, it's summertime, but yet these are all dead ash trees. And That was because throughout the Midwest and in various parts of the East Coast, after they suffered the mortality of all the elm trees, they planted a monoculture of ash trees. And they didn't learn the lesson to diversify their urban forests. So we're fortunate here in Oregon. We have great urban forest diversity in our streets and in our parks, but where we stand to suffer is in our riparian areas and natural areas. Our native ash, Oregon ash or Fraxinus latifolia, is highly susceptible to the emerald ash borer, and we have millions upon millions of trees that will almost certainly die if they're not treated, or if we are unable to utilize biological controls or other strategies to slow or stop the spread. We don't have high hopes based on what we've seen elsewhere, but we're going to give it our shot. What we do have is we've responded rapidly. We had early detection, and we have the edge that the Midwestern states did not have. They were already 7 to or so years into the infestation when they realized what was going on. So we're hoping to use that forewarning. We had a plan in place even before the emerald ash borer arrived, and it's that sort of proactive planning and establishing a network and assembling resources and running through scenarios that is going to serve us well in the years to come. This map shows in Washington County, this map demonstrates the areas of high ash density. And as you can see, Washington County has arguably one of the biggest areas of vulnerability throughout the state. And also, it's worth mentioning, I can't think of another county that has invested more collectively in watershed restoration activities. So Washington County, all the various partners, the water and soil conservation district folks, the watershed councils and community partners have invested millions upon millions of dollars and countless hours of staff time and volunteer efforts. So there's a whole lot that we stand to lose. Switching to an overview, I'd now like to just describe what I know most of you are already familiar with. Here in Oregon, we enjoy an exceptional quality of life. Other than the folks who were born here, I think most of us came to Oregon because we recognized it is unique among the 50 states, and something about the landscape, which clearly influences the people. We're not like other states. And I would contend that that is in large part due to, or thanks to our unique land use laws that were established in the early 70s. And basically those laws set strict boundaries around our city. Our urban growth boundaries are fixed. And while they can be expanded, it takes a lot of time and energy to do so. So that helps to prevent urban sprawl and urban scatteration, as I like to call it, and helps to protect working forests and farmlands. And that's what really differentiates our state from other states. Washington State to the north, for instance. They do many things well, but there's a clear difference. Likewise, we have open beach access, can't be commercialized, and so forth and so on. But the unfortunate side of our land use planning laws or regulations is the fact that it has put intense pressure on our urban areas to densify very early on. And it has created a competition for space that many communities of the same age don't experience until much later, until they're far more urbanized. I would say it's worth that pressure. We just need to be mindful and thoughtful that that is a consequence, and we have to design systems to counteract those pressures, lest we fall prey to or find ourselves in a situation like this. I'm not sure where this exactly is. I suspect it's likely California or Nevada, but this just makes me cringe. I can say without even knowing anything, zooming in, the people who live here are less healthy, are psychologically less centered and grounded, and are spending far more on medications and don't have the positive influences of nature that are so essential to communities and the human psyche. So let this stand as what we're trying to avoid. Development for development's sake, which provides housing, but not the sort of housing that creates the communities that we desire and the livability that we desire. Now I'd like to just quickly run through what I know we are all aware of, but it's just worth running through what we are trying to contend with or anticipate or prevent with urban development or peri-urban development, and what we see urban forestry as an antidote to. The first is tree canopy loss. We all know, we've read in the paper that we're losing a tremendous amount of tree canopy cover in our cities. And the reasons for that are many. We have climate change, the extreme heat, we have longstanding persistent drought, we have development pressure, and we have exotic pests and pathogens. Taken all together, it's really taking its toll. And we have to remember that trees are one of our first lines of defense for fighting climate change. They help to absorb that CO2, which is heating up the planet, but they also help us to adapt to those conditions and make the temperatures cooler and clean our air, provide habitat for various organisms that we're reliant upon, and clean our water, as Kelly mentioned early on. Another syndrome that we're facing is forest fragmentation, which is different from canopy loss. As you can see in this picture, there are plenty of trees, and the percentage of tree canopy is rather high. However, from a functional standpoint, the hydrological function, the ecological functionality or connectivity has been altered through roads and through structures. So it's very important. We know that a tree standing in isolation or an organism in isolation is not as strong and does not provide the same set of ecosystem services that we need as a community of organisms. So fragmentation is a real concern. Another situation I'm seeing throughout the state, but especially in those areas that are near our metro centers like Portland that are experiencing heavy infill pressure or development pressure, is soil degradation. And not many folks are talking about this, but it's a real problem. And that often stems from poor field practices also that are allowed by less than ideal ordinances or regulations, requirements for maintaining high quality soils in our development areas, so whether on public property, on private property, or as in the case here, on public property. I'll talk about these bioswales or engineered stormwater facilities a bit more in depth later, but we're losing a lot of trees in our cities, and we're being told that we're being greened by building these stormwater facilities, which are great for capturing floodwater and dealing with it to prevent inundation, but it does not recharge our soils and our aquifers and our groundwater and keep our soils healthy and vital and alive in the same way that a tree would. I would contend, and folks are finally starting to quantify it, that if this were filled with 3-4 feet of original parent soil material, healthy topsoil, and trees, our ability to take up that stormwater and deal with that flood surge would be almost identical, but the uptake of heavy metals and the infiltration and all the ecosystems, the co-benefits would be far greater. So these stormwater facilities are very expensive to install, to design, build, and maintain, far more than trees are. So I'm trying to awaken folks to the fact that one of the greatest threats to our cities currently involves chasing or following federal requirements for stormwater treatment that are not necessarily biophilic. We're also seeing soil compaction and soil replacement in development areas that are hostile to life. This, you can't imagine gardening in substrate like this. We could barely get our shovels in here. I've seen urban soils, post-development soils that stopped a mechanical auger in its tracks. It could not even penetrate it. And it's foolhardy to think that we could plant a tree in it and expect it to survive even a couple years, let alone the 100 years that we're striving for. We also see a lot of topsoil removal in our development sites, and that's a real problem as well. Here we see a large piece of machinery that is not just compacting that precious Willamette Valley soil, but loading it and shipping it away from the site, and then importing gravel. And we're just reducing the vitality of our soils, which, if you think about it, our soils are our most primary natural resource. In many ways, trees are just an ephemeral expression of that primary resource. And we should be placing a little more time and effort on soil preservation, not just tree preservation. They're both important, but just want to call that out. Getting back to the stormwater facility situation, this is a case study that I was involved with down in Eugene. We have two adjacent neighborhoods. The neighborhood on the right that is shown from an aerial perspective in the photo, and then the kind of blueprint of that, or the plan of that, showing the dots of trees that exist currently in the older neighborhood, which is about 22 years older than the left-hand side of the screen. And because the developer was allowed to treat their stormwater in the right-of-way by creating those stormwater facilities, those engineered stormwater facilities, it precluded the possibility for tree planting, as you can see here. So this site has almost the same number of properties as this, but it could only sustain about a third or a quarter of the number of trees. And that was really disappointing to me, because in Eugene, there is a clear ordinance saying that all new developments must have trees averaging 30 feet on center, and that is nowhere near it. However, because the stormwater facilities are treated and considered to be a utility, a public utility, there are allowances made. So just want to call folks' attention to that ongoing conflict, and we would do well to come up with some remedies. So one possible remedy that may not be favorable to a developer is to treat the stormwater in a centralized location, maybe take one lot or two lots. And I don't expect a developer to do that out of altruism or kindness. We need to find ways to incentivize it and make it pencil out for them, and to reward them for doing the right thing ecologically and livability wise, and not penalize them for doing the right thing economically. So at the risk of getting a little too theoretical, I'll try and keep it high level. For many years, I've been very interested in and done a lot of research on what a sustainable urban forest entails. Most commonly, most people think of an urban forest as a collection of trees and maybe some ground vegetation, maybe, if they're even broader thinking, including rivers and waterways and other natural resources. But I'd like to expand that concept to include built infrastructure as well, because and kind of consider it as the physical urban forest. And that's a interconnected network of green infrastructure and built infrastructure that has to coexist and operate in tandem and harmony. So that's 1/3 of what I consider to be an urban forest. But then there's also an administrative component. In a sustainable urban forest, it requires active management, planning and management, and that's the administrative component that is currently lacking, at least in the county level, to coordinate those peri-urban or ex-urban areas that are that we're seeing tree loss and urban forestry issues. In many of the cities, Forest Grove and Hillsborough and such, there are budgets and dedicated staff, so that is taken care of, but it's the gaps that we're trying to fill. And then last but not least, and arguably perhaps most importantly, we have the social and community component. And it's really, those operate all together to comprise, once again, a healthy urban forest. And I'll move quickly through here, lest I get in the weeds. But with regard to the natural resource and infrastructure component, some of the things that can further our cause, serve as an aid or as a barrier to progress, involve that spatial competition or constraints and conflicts. We have tree issues, getting the right species, having tree diversity, the right tree for the site if it's too big or too small. We have a variety of soil issues, as mentioned. We have engineering issues where it may not pencil out or may involve taking extreme measures. And last but not least, we have climate issues. So those all serve as potential limiting factors for that component. Next, we have the social and community component. That involves public awareness and education and engagement. We often see with urban forestry efforts negative unintended consequences resulting in gentrification or displacement. We make an area nicer, more livable, and we see property values rising. And pretty soon the people that we hope to benefit are no longer able to afford to live in that neighborhood and are displaced. And it's essential that we consider those impacts and take pains to avoid that. And that can be done perhaps not with urban forestry efforts, but with planning and development things, but we have to be mindful of it. Last but not least, we need stakeholder cooperation. There's a saying, I think Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So that's a fancy way of saying if we don't have community buy-in and understanding, the best laid plans will not result in the outcomes that we're striving for. Last but not least, the administrative component. Once again, this is what tonight's talk is advocating for, is to find a way to create a robust administrative component within Washington County that can serve the areas and provide for regulations and requirements, standard specifications, providing incentives and disincentives for tree planting and preservation, and soil preservation and water conservation, clear policies and procedures, and arguably most important, funding. Because you might have all these without funding, it's not going to be feasible. And I know my colleagues in Washington County are very aware of this fact, and that is arguably one of the standing barriers to having an urban forest or an urban forestry program. And as I'll discuss later, I'm hoping that the state and the federal government can step in and do what's right so that Washington County is not left with an unfunded mandate. So very simply, the purpose of an urban forestry, what are we striving for? What are we hoping to attain? I like to think of it as maximizing social, economic, and environmental benefits for a community and the urban forest, and while minimizing costs and liabilities over the long term. So really, it's about net benefits. There's always going to be cost. There's always going to be some risk involved with living organisms and development endeavors. But if we can minimize those cons or downsides or burdens and maximize the benefits, like any investment, the net benefits will be worth the money that we spend. As Kelly alluded to in her introduction, we know that trees and urban nature are a remedy for the problems that we're surrounded with. Violence and crime and general pessimism and the general malaise and lower test scores for students and such. We have people are suffering in the terms of the way they feel. They're suffering in the way that their thought processes are occurring, and we're seeing behavioral issues. And I know I've seen it in action. Trees can profoundly impact those, and it's a far more cost-effective approach than throwing medications or throwing people in jail or medicating them after the fact, after the problems have occurred. So the tagline for tonight's, or the motto for tonight's talk is prevention rather than cure. Along the lines of the health and psychological benefits that trees and urban forests provide, new technologies and big data have allowed us to really hone in on very specific health outcomes for exposure to nature, not just tree canopy cover, but waterways, parks. Dutch researcher who teaches at the University of British Columbia recently came up with the 3-30-300 rule. And basically what that refers to is that a bare minimum goal for cities or for communities should be 3 mature trees visible from a person's window to provide that exposure to urban nature. Minimum canopy cover of 30% throughout the community, and then maximum distance of 300 meters to an area, a natural area of at least 1 hectare or 2.5 acres in size. If we can do that, that would make such a real difference. So that has become the new standard, gold standard for urban health and well-being. And if we can do that, we'll find this program, this company, NatureQuant, based in Eugene, has been, if you go to the NatureQuant website, do a Google search for NatureQuant or NatureScore, you can enter in your address as you see here. I did it for Forest Grove, and it gives you very real quantities or metrics for contributions to longevity, obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, frequent mental distress, physical inactivity, breast cancer deaths, and so forth and so on. So we are now living in the information age, and we're able to connect the dots like never before. And as we've long suspected, access to urban nature, trees are not just a nicety, they're a necessity for human well-being, and we can quantify that. How do we further connect the dots? Well, we have a statewide tree inventory system called Tree Plotter, and I'm hoping to make that soon available to Washington County and the communities therein at no charge, and help them plan their urban forest more effectively. You can't really plan for something or manage something effectively if you don't know what you're dealing with. And an inventory and remote sensing technologies or assessments are a critical first step. So we now have those tools. We also have ways of ascertaining tree canopy density and percentages. This is a screenshot from a tool that we were using in Eugene. It shows area of tree cover percentage ranging from almost 0 to 87%. And then a related data set relates to socioeconomic or demographic vulnerability. So it factors in income and health status and language and mobility things. And it really gives a nice indication of not just where the trees are or aren't, but where the people, what the social context is, so that we can prioritize our activities and channel those limited resources into precisely the areas that need it most. So targeted interventions. I included this slide because many folks say, well, what, the cost of development are so high. Why can't we just build and really make it easy for developers to do their thing and then come in and retrofit for green infrastructure after the fact? And I struck upon a pretty good analogy. It would be analogous to saying, well, why don't we just wire our homes and our businesses for electricity after we've drywalled and painted our interiors. Yes, it can be done. But it just does not make sense. With good planning, our outcomes would be much better, and we could do it for a fraction of the cost. These are sites in Eugene that we jackhammered the concrete, very thick concrete. We removed the highly compacted highly contaminated urban soils filled with gravel and other things, re-amended with 4 feet of good loam and rich compost. And the trees that we planted are now doing really well almost 10 years later. But it was very expensive, and it would have been much more efficient to design green infrastructure in when this area was built. And I recognize that can't always be done, but in new development areas, it's critical to operate proactively through good planning rather than after the fact and reactively. I included this slide just to remind us that it's not just about the trees. Trees are part of a broader ecological community. Ground vegetation and herbaceous plants and woody shrubs and pollinators and avian species and the whole web of life that operate in a community. And we have to be very mindful that it's not just about preserving trees, but keeping functional ecosystems intact, because they're under threat as well. And once they start unraveling, it's going to be hard to stop. Using the tools that I've described, we have a very real chance to protect exceptional trees, heritage stature trees, as we see here. This is a state heritage tree down in Eugene. It's the Owen cherry tree. It's a massive cherry. This is probably 7 or 8 feet in diameter at the base, as you can see, the folks for scale. And I've seen so many extraordinary trees that were lost because people didn't understand what their value, what their size, what their contributions were. So using the tools, I'd like to highlight using our social network and our information systems and incentives to preserve that, because they really are cultural icons and give our communities an essential sense of place. I included this photo in the mix just to highlight the importance of ongoing preventative maintenance. Those cities and communities that have sustainable urban forests and really exceptional urban forests are those communities that invest on a regular basis in professional staff or contractors who can provide ongoing cyclical care to help prevent problems before they manifest and to help create more resilient and storm resistant trees. And the cost savings, I would contend for every dollar invested in preventative maintenance, you're saving a ton of money down the line, almost like an automobile fleet. Yes, you can wait until things start going awry, or perhaps facilities for an organization, but preventative maintenance is the way to go. I included this slide because with all the trees that we anticipate to lose due to emerald ash borer and all the forest land that has now been identified as susceptible to wildfire threat, we have a very real need to deal with ladder fuels and woody debris and biomass like never before. And I'm convinced that biochar production, an air curtain incinerator or air curtain burner, such as this, which is highly portable, but they also make larger scale machines that are the size of a shipping container and can deal with vast amounts of material and create a product that sequesters carbon rather than having it go up into the atmosphere like a slash pile would or like chipped material would do in short order. Wood chips can amend the soil and help sequester carbon there, but a lot of decay occurs and the CO2 is just revolatilizing. So I just want to plant a seed, as it were, that biochar, I think, is going to be a technology that has a tremendous amount of potential for helping our urban forests. Biochar is important for soil and for tree growth. Studies have shown that trees planted in biochar amended soils have greater resilience. The soils have better water holding capacity, and it's regenerative additive to the soil. Likewise, because we're gonna be swimming in a lot of dead trees and woody material, I'd like to see an efforts placed in urban wood utilization, where that material can be sequestered, made into valuable lumber and value-added products. This would have great implications for workforce development and economic development, and really help our cities prosper. And then lastly, we have the possibility for growing trees and bolstering community resilience, not just environmentally, but economically and culturally. We have a thriving nursery industry in Washington County, as well as an agricultural community. And let's start making some lemonade out of the lemons that we're facing with. We have a great need for trees, and let's put people to work and start basing our prosperity on helping our natural systems. As mentioned, trees do so much to provide community identity and cohesion. These are sites scattered throughout Eugene. Trees have a way of adding to property values, as Kelly mentioned, and they're far more than niceties. They're necessities for community well-being and prosperity. So the key takeaways from tonight's talk that I'd like to leave you with are basically that trees are critical infrastructure. And unlike built infrastructure, which depreciates from the time it's installed, trees and green infrastructure can appreciate over time and grow in value, like a savings account. But it's essential that they're properly cared for. Secondarily, we need to recognize that these living public assets are no less important than other types of infrastructure, roads, utilities, buildings, and as mentioned, are not niceties, they're necessities. And they require good planning, frequent assessment, and proactive maintenance. I'd also like to leave you with this takeaway that the cost of hiring an urban forester or establishing an urban forestry program is typically far less than the value returned in terms of benefits provided to a community, and arguably most importantly to the various teams, interagency, and developers actually that they're tasked with collaborating with. A good urban forester will not slow down the process or create barriers. They'll actually, if they're doing what they're trained to do, help facilitate good communication and positive outcomes amongst all the stakeholders, helping to streamline planning and development processes. Lastly, I'd like to, as I alluded to earlier, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act and some new state legislative concepts or bills that are in the works, we have some key opportunities to help fund Washington County urban forester, or to establish a program. We're not sure exactly what that looks like. It's not for us to determine. It's for the residents and stakeholders of Washington County to determine. But I want to let you know that we're excited to help in that prospect, to secure funding and to provide technical and financial assistance, and to serve as a liaison with the federal government to make that happen, and to use Washington County as a pilot project or a partner, an initial partner, because we recognize this is not a unique need to just Washington County. We see it everywhere. Once the counties lost timber revenues, however many years ago, it's not surprising that more than half the state is talking about succeeding and joining Idaho. It's high time that we really help those county partners to do the work that they'd like to do, and not just say, you need to do this, but provide substantive support. So please know that our team is excited about exploring the possibilities, and it's not, once again, a mandate that we're imposing upon Washington County or the various agencies. We would like to work with to figure out what the goals and objectives of Washington County communities are, and then to help make that happen. Sorry for the heavy text at the end. I'm happy to field questions at this point via the chat. Thank you for your time and attention. And at this point, I'll stop sharing.
Great, we can take your questions. I think you're able to type in the chat box. If you're not, please let me know.
It looks, I see Jean shaking her head that that's not feasible.
Now it is. It was disabled. Now it's good.
Sorry,
Fantastic.
I disabled it just so we could have the talk uninterrupted, but it's open. Doors are open for your comments. So type away and I'll try to capture what I see there. And I believe, Scott, you're able to see the chat as well.
Yes, I see tree, nature quant and tree plotter is the last entries. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Great.
Does anybody have a question? Want to follow up on any particular topic? I thought that was a wonderful talk, Scott. It really hits on a lot of the various things that Tree Keepers has been working on. And so we really appreciate your coming and doing this for free. And I think it really gives everybody an opportunity to really come together and think about, is an urban forester a really good plan for us? So let's go to the questions now. All
Great.
right.
I can see the first question that asks, what incentives do developers have to cooperate with an urban forestry program? And as mentioned earlier, ideally, a good urban forester has one foot in the arboriculture or municipal forestry realm, but another foot in the planning realm and in the project management realm. And a good urban forester will help streamline processes and identify problems before they become super problematic. So it's early on, and to give folks forewarning, to let them know, to give them clear expectations and to work with them collaboratively, not just to say you must or you can't do this, but providing positive alternatives to get ideal outcomes. And what I found is, although some people might initially have reservations about having to yet deal with more red tape, ideally, the amount of red tape decreases, and allied work teams, whether those are planners or civil engineers or architects or transportation planners, they feel their load lightened, and they're best suited. They're often on the fringe of their areas of expertise, delving into tree issues. So I found it can be really helpful for building team cohesion. So incentives, well, that's where good planning and ordinances can come. Oftentimes, ordinances can bake in incentives to reward developers for doing the right thing, and make the cost benefit analysis work in favor of tree preservation and protection. Hopefully that addressed your question. So next is Reggie Frumkin. I recognize that name, a masterful map maker from years ago that I still rely on. Where does the county commissioner currently stand on creating an urban forestry program and or hiring an urban forester? I would not consider myself well suited to answer this. I've heard through the grapevine that they the county commissioners are trying to consider the wishes of all their stakeholders, and are taking a measured approach and a cautious approach, as they well should. But hopefully, as this discussion continues, we can make it clear that there are resources that we can bring to bear, and that we can address the financial barriers that are certainly there and need to be addressed, and that it is a conversation that can result in not just tree protection, but facilitating quality development, increased affordable housing, and all the amenities or benefits that we're striving for. So if folks from tree keepers wish to weigh in on that answer, I'm happy to pause and have you field a more thorough answer or provide.
Well, we are working with them now. There's several commissioners that are very gung ho, and we need to reach out to some of the others. There's 5 commissioners, so 3 of the 5 need to be very much for the plan, and it has to be incorporated into their budget. We're working on it, but we need help from all of you to kind of help us with the going to meetings, writing testimony, just attending their meetings, and show them how much we really do want this urban forestry program to go into effect. So we invite you to participate, please.
Great. Next question is there anything we can do to help move this urban forestry program forward? I would say participating in events like tonight, building that strong community engagement and awareness component. Tree Keepers has done a lot of research to highlight successful case studies. So I'm a big fan of not just saying don't do this, but providing viable alternatives, successful examples of what can be done, and then helping to replicate that, and once again bringing resources to bear. Don't just say you need to do this. This is all of us working together. So building a coalition and support and positive dialogues. Really, I see so many public processes breaking down because people are entrenched in a position, and this really is not so much about us, but about our kids and future generations. And if we can put our egos on ice and just recognize that we're trying to create a better world, and that we may not individually have all the answers, but if we work together collaboratively, we can often achieve great things. So the next question, thank you for that vote of support. And next is, we've lost several 30 to 50 foot western red cedars, or maybe that's inches, I can't quite see, in the last storm before Christmas. What is a tree planting list of candidates that can better withstand the pressures? Excellent question. So having a good list of tree possibilities, a recommended species list, and not just things that will survive, but things that can handle a wide variety of conditions and changing conditions, whether those are hot, dry conditions or extreme cold, windy conditions. So we're losing a lot of native species like the western red cedar. We're also seeing dieback in big leaf maples. And as mentioned, we're going to lose a tremendous number of our Oregon ash. So experimentation is going to be essential, and sharing that information and doubling up, overplanting in many cases, rather than just planting one for one. Washington County is currently implementing sustainable urban forestry, and I would agree. I'm really inspired. This was a message from Anne, who I had the good fortune to meet a few weeks back, and loved what I heard. And I'm really excited to partner with Anne and her colleagues to start implementing some of these collaborative endeavors. So I'm really optimistic. We have a window of opportunity thanks to the federal funding that is going to be made available. So I'm reaching out to all partners and asking them to come up with some ideas that I can incorporate into grant proposals in the weeks to come. 2 points. Next, this is from Garrett. Good broad coverage, but it is not as easy as it sounds. Not all trees are the same. And in fact, an urban forestry program requires great skill. I would agree with that. Just the split between coniferous and non-coniferous, and in Oregon, the broadleaf evergreens. Yes, so diversity is far more than species diversity. It entails age diversity, functional type diversity, genetic diversity, or interest-specific diversity. And of all counties, Washington County has the greatest need since it has the greatest population of semi-urban, non-city people in the state. Yes. So once again, context is essential. A single recipe, one size does not fit all. Details matter, and the last thing I would want to suggest is that quick cursory treatment of this. It's far more detailed, but trying to at least align folks and build some optimism. So to be continued, Garrett. Thank you. Why has Washington County not developed an urban forestry program? Well, very few counties in the nation actually have developed urban forestry programs. Many municipal entities have. The only formal urban forestry program I'm aware of is in Fairfax County, Virginia. A colleague works for them as an urban forester. They have a longstanding program. They're located on the on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. So they've been around for a lot longer, far greater population density and history, and arguably a far wealthier community. But they were on the vanguard, and they have an extensive urban forestry program that differs considerably from municipal urban forestry programs, but they would be a great model. So I would refer folks who are interested to peruse their website, explore. King County has a conservation county, King County Conservation District has many essential elements, and I think they could likewise serve as a positive model. But beyond that, in my queries, I've not found something. So in many ways, we're on the vanguard ourselves. And once again, I'd love to work collaboratively with Washington County to explore and figure out where the barriers are and how we can move progress forward. Jean asks, our neighborhood has large tree falls every winter. My neighbors are now afraid about their trees. This is a huge problem. Yes, risk aversion is, and the last thing, what I was hoping to highlight is trees have benefits, but it's not all about benefits. They have very considerable risks and liabilities associated with them. We just have to remember, just like driving an automobile comes at a great risk, but the advantages of utilizing that technology or flying, we have to take a balanced approach and do what we can through good planning to minimize those costs and liabilities. But to simply say, oh, trees are fine, they're safe, you don't need to worry about them, that's doing people and trees a profound disservice. So I do recognize that. And that's where education and risk management and good planning comes into play. There are many trees that should be taken out and removed and replaced, but right tree in the right spot is our operational mantra. Are you familiar with Metro's Urban Green Growth Management Functional Plan, Title 13, Nature and Neighborhoods? Purposes of this program, I'm not. I've recently come to realize how many great documents and plans are out there, but are kind of siloed. And if you know where to look, they're readily available. If you don't know where to look, not so much. So I'm doing my best to stand up a network, a learning network, information sharing network, and implementation network to break down these silos and informational barriers so that if folks have questions, we can rely on peer-to-peer learning. That's why events like tonight are so important. I will definitely consult this plan, and I'm sure I'll have a lot to learn. Please know that I would never pretend to be an expert on everything. The longer I'm alive, the more I realize how little I actually know. But I do know that I can bring people together and convene, connect people and ideas and resources effectively. So that's what I strive to do. And if I can build a little goodwill and cheer in the mix, I consider that success. Clean Water Services in Washington County has planted a high percentage of ash trees. They're planted along the Tualatin River. would the air curtain burner for biochar productivity be, I'm assuming, a good choice here? Yes, I work closely with Clean Water Services folks, Rob Emanuel and his staff, and we are going to be doing a test burn, and we are really excited. One of Rob's superiors is really excited about the ability to treat some pathogens with that technology, not just emerald ash borer, but also help water quality and soil quality and so forth. So we really have to think in terms of multifunctional solutions. We can't, as we so have often done in the past, just try and address singular problems with our efforts. We have to address multiple problems, all those wicked problems simultaneously wherever possible. So in terms of tax, Clean Water Services did plant a lot of ash trees, but that was before it was recognized that they might be a problem down the line. They have diversified and ceased to plant ash trees. And honestly, of all the partners and entities within Oregon, I have the least concerns about Clean Water Services. They are walking the talk when it comes to adaptive management, and they will pivot quickly, and I'm very optimistic. So I see Beyond Toxics, Lisa Arkin's name mentioned. I've been involved in projects involving hybrid poplar growth or planting to absorb groundwater contamination. So yes, and I hope to bake Lisa and that great organization into some proposals moving forward. And
I just wanted to say there's a number of questions in the public chat, and I think people are chatting directly with you. But I
I'm sorry.
Would like you to attend some of these.
Thank you for, I was not aware. I thought I was addressing those public comments. So how would you like to?
No, just could do some. Can you see some of the ones in the chat, or should I read some of them?
Yeah, if you'd like to read them that and select. I was just going down the line.
Well, this chat is from Mike Myers, and it's to everyone. Are you familiar with Metro's Urban Growth Management Functional Plan, Title 13, Nature and Neighborhoods? He gives a number, intent. The purposes of this program are: 1, to conserve, protect, and restore continuously ecologically viable streamside corridor systems from the streams headwaters to their confluence with the streams and rivers and with their floodplains in a manner that is integrated with upland wildlife habitat and with surrounding urban landscape. And number
Hey,
2,
Josie,
Yeah.
I think Scott answered that. He's actually seeing the same thing you are. And
oh, I'm sorry.
he's kind of moved on from that one.
I'm sorry.
That's where he talked about forming a network,
Yeah, sorry.
exchanging information.
No problem. I'll defer to you, Josie, if you want to.
No, I think you're doing a good job. Keep going.
Okay, great. I'll jump in where I left off. Ann Leffler notes that urban forestry is one of the tasks we perform in environmental services at Washington County Land Use and Transportation. And once again, really to have success in these endeavors, it is almost never a single department or team of experts in an isolated field. It really requires interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary collaboration. And I'm excited to work with planners in land use and transportation, but also public works folks and civil engineers and so forth. And that's where we really get the traction that we need. Elaine asks, what can be done to deal with housing sizes being increased to fill the whole lot, not leaving any land left to plant trees? That's the crux of the biscuit, as it were. We understand that to make things pencil out, it's become, as we all know, inflation is going rampant. Development costs are going through the roof, as with everything else. Labor prices are also skyrocketing. Labor availability is less reliable than ever before. we certainly can't fault developers for trying to maximize what they're allowed to do, but that's where planning needs to come into play, and we need to work collaboratively to figure out, okay, if we're going to take up an entire lot, should we allow that, first of all? And if we do allow that, how can we mitigate that to have more collective open space to offset that and to still provide the amenities that we are striving for? And once again, referring to fighting fragmentation or promoting connectivity, that plays into this as well. So it's not just to balance one for one, but to have those trees and ecosystems structured properly so that we get the functionality that we're striving for. I won't pretend to have any pat answer. This is something that needs to be decided on a case-by-case basis in each community. And I'm a big proponent for doing trials and seeing, okay, here we did this, here we did this, here we did this, kind of taking note of what works best, where the greatest satisfaction is, and then promoting that information and replicating it elsewhere. Garrett asks or notes, reply to Mike Meyer. I support an urban inventory on a common database, but not clear how Metro might implement it at this stage. And far be it from me to say, it's once again, will require ongoing conversation with all the right people. And that's tonight is an initial step in that direction. Mora replies to, where does the count, having discussions considered working with OSU to bring an additional forester dedicated to Washington County to their program? Excellent suggestion. Yes, we work closely with extension agents in OSU, as do our partners at Clean Water Services and the Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District. And that's really where we get an amazing amount of power and synergy when we get academic practitioners and institutions collaborating with municipal entities and county entities and intergovernmental agencies and the private sector as well. We can't forget the private sector. Oftentimes they're viewed as or excluded, and really they are the engine driving our economy. So if we're going to have success, it's going to be essential to have solutions that they're in favor of, and actually not just in favor of, but that they've played a role in generating. Jean asks, I found the short TED Talk to be very intriguing, or notes. Great, I look forward to seeing that. Brita, hi Brita, with the arrival of EAB to Washington County, does this bring higher priority to hiring an urban forester with ODF and federal funding support? It sure does, but we could hire, honestly, 4 folks and still not have enough hands on deck. So we're going to do our best to grow our program and build capacity while simultaneously helping municipalities and county agencies and organizations such as yours build capacity as well. What would a best guess for such a position or program implementation timeline look like? As soon as possible, but I'm hopeful that within the next 6 months, we might gain 1 or 2 or perhaps even 3 additional positions, but I can't count on that, but I'm hopeful and I'll keep pushing for that. Is there such a tree list for our area? I think I know that I heard from Ann Leffler that the county is publishing a new tree list for approved tree species list for Washington County. There are other great references and resources being developed by OSU and some of our partner agencies who all already are utilizing those lists. So once again, I'm hoping to develop a network that information is readily accessible and someone wouldn't have to work very hard to find a tree that could sit fit a specific site. And just to clarify, all trees within the urban growth boundary are in the municipality's jurisdiction. Yes, that is clear. So it is those trees outside of those urban growth boundaries that I think most folks here tonight are concerned about, and that tend to fall through the cracks. So where we can not duplicate efforts, but not leave gaps. That's what we're striving for. So Dale, please address my question about CWS, Clean Water Services, ash borer. So I remember that Clean Water Services has planted a high percentage of ash trees. Those are Oregon ash trees, which are susceptible to AB. They planted them next to the Tualatin River, yes. And would the air curtain burner for biochar productivity work for those? If they were infected and need to be removed, yes, the air curtain burner could be utilized. And the Clean Water Services has a financial incentive because they do trading. It seems like ratepayers may end up paying for the experimental tree planting. I would say that they have been very, as soon as best management practices or recommendations pivoted and changed, they quickly ceased planting the ash. So I don't know that it was experimental. When they were doing it, there will be costs involved, but they once again strike me as a very responsive and proactive organization. And that's the nature of restoration work, to follow best current thinking until it ceases to be best current thinking, and then to quickly pivot. Kind of like we saw with the medical advice during the pandemic. So hopefully that addresses your concern. Where did I leave off? Love a call. I'm assuming Anne's referring to input or calls from participants tonight. Reply to Garrett. I don't see a question there. So to everyone, backyard habitat is another program to align with. I agree, and great suggestion. I will note that and try and find ways to connect with them and see if we can help do some pass-through grant funding to promote their work, their very important work. King City is trying to push through a conservancy. How can you help prevent this from happening? I'm not familiar with that, but look forward to learning more. Old growth trees are, if they're old growth or large statured trees, in large part are irreplaceable. So once again, creating incentives and clear, reasonable measures to ensure that that which cannot be replaced is not lost just out of lack of awareness. Dale, okay, great. Direct climate change advice on lost Western red cedars. So yeah, given intense heat and drought stress, the Western red cedars have been, we've seen extensive dieback, and I would say that based on that, I would recognize that they may not be a good long-term candidate as they used to be. So I would definitely diversify. I think they're still an important tree to replant and to perpetuate, but I would hedge my bets and diversify my portfolio, as it were, of tree species. And it depends. Non-native species, I think there could be a case to be made depending on the site context. In highly disturbed areas or already disturbed or developed areas, introduced trees have a place, but in natural areas where we're trying to preserve ecosystems, there might be some native alternatives that are worth exploring. any local organization, Dan asks, that deals with getting trees on a heritage tree list? There are. So there is the state heritage tree program, and then many municipalities have a legacy tree program or a heritage tree program. And I would like to explore options for funding. What I see is many people don't have the means to care for or provide the ongoing monitoring and care for heritage trees. I would like to suggest that we look to ways to ensure that funding is always available, and people should be rewarded for having a heritage tree on their property, and supporting that to have tree care and assessment needs met, and baking that into the process. So I would refer you to local organizations, and I'm working to build my familiarity with who those might be. Dale asks, Forest Grove's watershed harvest trees in its watershed, but as Josie made public comment, they harvest too many trees. So I'll leave that to Josie to highlight for me. How does a property owner with significant trees, such as half an acre of big Doug firs, how would they be compensated for not cutting them and developing rather than retraining the small forest? I think there are many possibilities, and once again, it's going to depend on the preferences of the local community. What works in one area of the country or in one city in Oregon may not be appropriate for another city, but there are some examples, creative situations. Carbon credits are one upcoming possibility. I can't claim to be an expert, but I know there's a lot of skepticism surrounding that at present in Oregon, and I think we're waiting to see how Washington and California deal with that. Protection for restoration, conservation easements, and things like that. That's a big topic, so happy to talk more. I'm educating myself day by day on that concept, but that really is key to this discussion tonight. How do we create incentives rather than disincentives wherever possible? And Garrett asks or notes, metros generally let cities manage their tree programs. We have not had the staff. It remains, as far as I know, a gray area whether and to what extent the guidance is suggestive or regulatory. The metro goals are something we will look at, but we are not in the role of telling cities how to implement. For example, recent Tualatin issue over removal of larger trees for a subdivision, that is best handled as internal city issue. And I would agree that overreach is not something, unfunded mandates or telling people what they can and should do usually does not result in the results we're seeking. It's through discussion, education, collaboration, engagement, and providing positive alternatives and roles and suggestions. And I know that sounds like a dance around, but it really is true. So once again, I don't tend to have the answers. Willamette Valley Ponderosa Pine, excellent species choice. They have a lot of potential for areas that other species are not well suited to. Heavy clay soils. They may not handle heavily inundated soils or high water tables for a long period of time, like the Oregon ash or willow might, but they definitely have their place and would be a good alternative. So with that, I thank everyone for your time and attention. Sorry for talking so quickly. If you have any, I welcome questions, comments, and invitations for future collaboration. So it's a pleasure to be working with you all and to be part of this coalition.
Well, that was absolutely wonderful. And I think Kelly has some closing remarks.
Getting off mute. Okay, so Scott, thank you so much. That was quite the marathon to race through those comments and answer those questions so comprehensively. And the presentation was great. Thank you so much for that. And thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for their participation in the meeting. We will be sending out a survey for your feedback on this meeting and also see if you might be interested in some of our upcoming tree keeper activities. Included in that will be a copy of this presentation to everybody who had registered. Through that, you'll also be given a link to sign a petition. It's on the screen now. Tree Keepers is promoting or pushing an online petition to urge county commissioners to leverage these existing state and federal funds to hire an urban forester for Washington County. So please take a few minutes to join us and sign on that as well. And then you will be also just ask you to look forward to another meeting in April, similar to this. An invitation will be sent out in the coming weeks, and that discussion will focus on tree policy and tree code. So lots going on, and look forward to continuing to engage with all of you and have your questions and input as we do our best to promote and protect existing trees. So with that, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. And again, thank you so much, Scott, for bringing all of this information to us. We really, really appreciate that.
Great program. Thank you, Scott, for coming.
And thank you, Josie, for pulling it together.
Okay, everyone. Good night. We'll see you online. Or,
Thank you all.
in emails. Bye. I'm ending the recording now.